Hey Internet, Michael Aubrecht here, drummer for Question Everything, writer for Drumhead Magazine, modern drummer author, and new ProLogix artist endorsee. Going to take a few minutes today to talk about one of my new favorite products and one of my new favorite subjects, which is the practice pad. And I have a little bit of a different philosophy, I think, than some people in regards to the practice pad. And really, I think I use it in a little bit of a different way than a lot of other people do. Now, obviously, the term practice pad, we of course think of that as a tool. Those of us who started out as little guys were probably given a practice pad, probably looked a little something like this whenever we were little, and had to prove to our parents that we were going to be serious enough about it, learning our craft before we were able to get our first drum set. So, of course, it's a tool. We think of it almost as a barbell of sorts that we use to build our strength, to build our chops. We, of course, all had to sit down with our rudiments and learn our rudiments and really still use this as a very important warm-up and exercise tool. However, I also look at the practice pad as a toy, and I do that for a number of different reasons. Now, growing up, of course, the practice pad was something that we had to look at as an absolute necessity. When we would sit down, we would think of it in much terms of formal way to conduct the different exercises, to learn the different stickings that go along with learning the craft of our instrument. But as I became older, I started to think of the practice pad, in addition to a warm-up tool, as a pleasure tool, for lack of a better term. I find myself in a house with 6 other people. I'm married, I have 4 children, and I practice a lot. I do a lot of different types of work, a lot of different types of drumming, and I'm not naturally gifted in the sense that I don't need to practice. So I am always working on drum set exercises, sticking exercises, marching drum type exercises. And if I did that on my drum kit, the amount of time that I actually do it, I'm pretty sure that my neighbors would call the cops and my wife and children would probably disown me. So the pad really has become an integral part of my routine and allows me to play for fun and also prepare for the different projects that I have coming up, whether it's the Monkeys for Technology film project or any of the work I'm doing with Question Everything, any of the recording I'm doing with film composer Attila Domos. Most of the stuff really comes out on the pad. And then I take the lessons learned that I kind of developed that and I transfer them to the drum set. When I'm developing different kinds of ideas for tracks, a lot of times those ideas come to me after hours. My kids are in bed, my wife is trying to relax, and there's no way that I could sit down and start thrashing on a drum set or one of my snare drums. So this pad really has become the blueprint or the drawing board where I develop the blueprints for all the stuff that I try to execute on the drum set, whether I'm putting something together for a performance or for a recording track. And ProLogix really has set the bar. They've reset the bar basically for practice pads. Their product is absolutely second to none. And there's a lot of wonderful things about ProLogix that kind of sets them apart from the other drum pad manufacturers, and it's really why I found them to be at the cutting edge of this particular type of technology. First of all, ProLogix, the surfaces on ProLogix pads, they don't just come out with a standard gum pad or a hard surface pad. They've got an entire line of drum pads specific to different types of levels and ages and stages. This red ProLogix pad that they have is for probably your intermediate players. It's got a great surface. It's got a great response. And what really impresses me about it is the fact that I can wail on this thing for hours at a time, and I really don't get the type of pain that I experience when I'm playing on other types of pads. I'm 41 years old. My hands are not getting any younger. And as I said before, I play all the time, and I do get sore. I do all the warm-ups and stretching and things that need to be done, but age is age, and my wrist and my hands get hurt. For some reason, the ProLogix pads just really support the type of playing that I do, and I don't feel myself having the type of physical stress and repercussions that come along with playing with some of those other pads. The other thing that's amazing about ProLogix pads is this wonderful rim. This rim that they've developed, it simulates, of course, the rim on your drums, and it really adds a second level to the pad as far as the things that you can do. I am a drumline guy, drum captain, and a lot of the stuff that we did, we would work with doing types of sticking on the rims and things like that, and you would get kind of like paradiddle grooves going where it was like, it was. Right? You couldn't do that on a regular drum pad that didn't have this wonderful rim. Another thing that I love to do, I'm a huge Papa Joe Jones fan. He's my all-time favorite drummer. And he did these amazing sort of rim shot kind of things when he would do his solos and when he would be doing these performances. And I love to do that kind of stuff. I love to incorporate some of the things that he did into my kind of playing. So, you can just... So this rim really adds a whole new level of the things that you can do with a drum pad. And the Coors pad, this is another example of another pad in their line. And this, of course, has a much harder surface. It simulates closer to a Kevlar type style head, right, that you would see in... Well, I should have warmed up before. Yeah, the types of heads that you would see in drumline, right? So it gives you... the type of head that you would use, and the dynamics of this head are so much like what you would experience on a real drum. It's not a one-dimensional pad. It is definitely the closest thing that I've experienced to simulating an actual marching snare drum. So those are just two of the types of pads that they have in their line. They've got a black pad, they've got a blue pad, they've got signature pads from artists. There's a whole entire sort of collective of ProLogix pads that will actually fit your needs no matter what kind of player you are. And really, what's amazing about this pad is not only does it sound great as a pad, right? Turn your snare on. Now, with Question Everything, if you're familiar with us, we're kind of like a cross between The Doors meets Devo. We're a very intense kind of band, and we do a lot of electronics. So I do a lot with sampling, I do a lot with trigger pads, and that's kind of my zone. And the other day, I was working on a track for Question Everything, and I was struggling to come up with a really effective snare sound. I wanted a snare sound that I could run in the background that had a bit of a marching groove to it, but wasn't too overpowering. And I've got about 300 snare samples, right, that I use on all these different pads, and I was unable to come up with anything that worked. And out of frustration, I sat down behind the kit, I turned off my laptop, I threw this pad down, and I just started... And I was like, wait a minute, that sounds great. So then I started riffing a marching thing, right? And it sounded great. And I recorded it, I sampled the track, and it was exactly what I needed. Now, that's an example of a happy little accident, but it's another extension of how great these pads sound. The response that you get, the resonance that you get off of these, and the fact that you can throw this thing on a standardized snare drum. I've got this beautiful Carmen Appice brass signature snare drum, really strong, really powerful, but doesn't really work for what we needed. I threw the ProLogix pad down, and it was exactly that sound that I was looking for, that would be subdued enough in the background. Right? So it was amazing. So the other thing I want to say real quick is the idea about these not just being tools, but toys, okay? Not just the idea that you can sit down and you can riff on these anytime you want and not disturb your neighbors and your family, but the idea of just playing for the sheer joy of playing. And one of the things that I found as a drum journalist, one of the blessings that I have is I get to interview and talk to and have ultimately become friends with a lot of really big name players, guys that are out there doing major tours. And the thing that I find consistently with these guys is the fact that when you reach a certain level as a professional musician and you're out on these huge tours, you don't have the free time to jam and just to play for the sheer joy of playing with the members of the other band, right? Everything is a very strict schedule. You show up, you've got sound check, you've got a preset list you've got to go over. If you're doing a clinic or an appearance or a television show, there is a clear-cut plan of what you're going to play and what you're going to perform. So a lot of these guys out there, the big name guys, the guys that are on the covers of the magazines that you and I read, the only time they have to sit down and play just for the sheer joy of playing is during their warm-up routine when they're backstage prior to the show. So a lot of these guys will pull out their ProLogix pad, they'll put it on a snare stand, they'll sit down, plug in their little iPods, and just play along to their favorite tracks and riff for fun. And once they're warmed up and they're ready to go, it's time to hit the stage and take care of business. So the ProLogix pad is really the only time that those guys have to sort of recapture the joy of playing as musicians as they did when they were trying to build themselves up to that career. So there's kind of a little bit of a curse that goes along with the blessing of being some of these big name drummers. So just a little bit for you to think about. ProLogix pads, check out their website. It's prologixpercussion.com. There's a lot of guys, way bigger names than I am on there. Rich Redmond, Jim Raleigh, Sean Deal, a lot of great players out there who swear by these pads as well. And the next time you sit down in a drum pad, don't just think of it as a tool. Think of it as a toy, because I think if you can recapture the joy of playing drums, it makes all those exercises that we have to do that much more enjoyable. Until then, thanks.